Most people think feeling stuck means something big is wrong with their life. But the truth is quieter than that. It hides in tiny decisions repeated so often they start to look like personality. And once that happens, movement feels impossible. Not because you cannot change, but because you stop noticing the millimeter shifts that quietly decide the direction of a life. Arman was 32 when that invisible weight started pressing on his chest every morning. Not panic, not tragedy. Just the dull sense that days were moving, but nothing inside him was. He had a stable job designing logistics spreadsheets for a regional shipping company. Good salary, decent apartment, friends who still invited him out. From the outside, nothing looked broken, which made the feeling worse. Because if nothing is wrong, why does everything feel paused? That question followed him everywhere. In the elevator, in the grocery line, in the quiet glow of his phone at 1:17 in the morning. He kept waiting for a breakthrough moment, a promotion, a sudden wave of motivation, some dramatic event that would flip the switch. But nothing came. Life simply repeated. Wake, scroll, rush, work, eat, distract, sleep, again. Weeks blurred into months. One Thursday evening, something small happened. So small most people would miss it. Arman almost did. He was leaving the office later than usual. The parking lot lights hummed like tired insects. He unlocked his car but didn't get in immediately. Instead, he looked back at the building. Hundreds of windows, most dark. A few glowing squares still holding people inside routines that felt important during the day, and strangely empty at night. For a moment he imagined time zooming out, years passing the same way, same desk, same commute, same quiet question in the background. The uncomfortable thought crept in slowly. What if nothing dramatic ever arrives? What if life changes through movements so small the brain refuses to respect them? That idea irritated him, because it sounded too simple, and simple things are easy to ignore. He drove home with the radio low and the question louder. When he reached his apartment, he repeated the usual pattern. Shoes off, phone out, thumb scrolling through strangers winning at life. New businesses, new bodies, new confidence, tiny movies of progress. The comparison sting arrived right on schedule. His brain whispered the same verdict it had been repeating for months. You are behind. You wasted time. Now it is too late to catch up. That sentence felt heavy because part of him believed it. But another quieter part noticed something strange. Everyone online showed massive leaps. No one showed the millimeters. And yet every skill, every career, every transformation must be built from movements almost invisible at first. The thought lingered, not inspiring, not comforting, just inconvenient. Because if progress begins with tiny shifts, then being stuck might also begin there. Arman set the phone down. The room was silent except for the refrigerator humming. He replayed his typical day like security footage. Nothing catastrophic, just dozens of microscopic choices. Snoozing the alarm twice, opening email before thinking, eating whatever required zero effort, postponing the small skill he always said he would learn someday. None of these looked important, but stacked together they quietly shaped the direction of his weeks. And direction repeated long enough becomes destiny. That realization landed differently, not like lightning, more like a dim light switching on in a long hallway. If 1% of a day changed, the path could bend, barely at first, almost invisible. But direction is patient, and time amplifies small angles. Still his mind resisted. A 1% change sounded laughably small, too small to matter tomorrow, too small to impress anyone. And that is exactly why most people never try it. The ego wants dramatic proof, huge effort, immediate results. But real change often hides in adjustments too small for the ego to celebrate. Arman leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Maybe being stuck was not a dramatic curse. Maybe it was simply unexamined repetition, the same tiny behaviors looping quietly, day after day, month after month, until the brain calls the pattern fate. If that was true, then the escape route would also be quiet. Not a revolution, a shift. 1% earlier, 1% braver, 1% more deliberate. He did not feel motivated. He felt curious, and curiosity is quieter than motivation but far more durable. So he asked a different question than the one haunting him for months. Not why am I stuck, But where is the smallest lever in my day? Because move the lever 1%, and the machine slowly changes direction. That night he wrote 3 tiny adjustments on a scrap of paper. They looked almost ridiculous, which made them strangely believable. Wake 10 minutes earlier. Spend those minutes learning the analytics software he kept postponing. And replace the late night scrolling with 10 pages of reading. Nothing heroic, nothing impressive, just a 1% tilt. Still a quiet doubt whispered, can something this small really change a life? He folded the paper anyway, because staying exactly the same suddenly felt like the bigger risk. And somewhere deep down he sensed a quiet truth. Massive change rarely begins with massive action. It begins with a shift so small the world does not notice. But your future does, eventually. Morning arrived with the same pale light leaking through the curtains. For a second Arman almost forgot the paper on the nightstand. His hand instinctively reached for the phone. Then he saw the folded scrap beside it. 3 small lines. Nothing dramatic. No grand promises. Just a quiet nudge in direction. His brain immediately tried to negotiate. 10 more minutes of sleep wouldn't matter. He could start tomorrow. A better day. A cleaner start. That was the familiar voice. The same voice that had been quietly protecting his comfort for years. Arman stared at the ceiling. He didn't feel inspired. In fact, he felt slightly annoyed. 10 minutes earlier meant the room felt colder. The pillow felt softer. The temptation to stay still felt stronger, which is exactly why the first shift mattered. Not because it was big, but because it interrupted the automatic script. He sat up. No fireworks. No surge of motivation. Just a quiet interruption of habit. He opened the laptop and searched for the analytics program he had bookmarked months earlier. The interface looked confusing at first. Charts, panels, buttons that meant nothing yet. For 10 minutes he watched a tutorial. Most of it didn't stick. But something subtle happened. A crack formed in the wall of postponement. Before leaving for work, he felt the strange satisfaction of doing something small that yesterday's version of himself would have delayed. The rest of the day looked the same on the surface. Same desk, same emails, same noise of keyboards around him. But inside, a microscopic shift had occurred. His mind started scanning for small levers. During lunch, he normally scrolled endlessly. That day, he opened the tutorial again for 6 minutes. Not impressive. But repetition compounds quietly. By the 3rd day, he noticed something else. Resistance began shrinking. The brain hates unfamiliar effort, but familiarity softens friction. What felt annoying on Monday felt neutral by Thursday. And neutral habits are powerful, because they no longer require willpower. Still, progress stayed invisible. No promotion, no applause, no dramatic life upgrade, which made doubt creep back in. Friday evening, Arman sat in his car again in the office parking lot. Same humming lights, same quiet building behind him. But this time the voice in his head sounded different. A question appeared. If 1% moves things forward, what moves them backward? The answer arrived quickly. Tiny neglect. Skipping the 10 minutes. Returning to endless scrolling. Letting comfort quietly reclaim the routine. The dangerous part wasn't a big failure. It was small drift. Direction bends both ways. That realization made him cautious. Because the brain loves stories of transformation. But it forgets how fragile early momentum is. The next week proved that. Tuesday morning he overslept. The alarm had rung, but exhaustion pinned him to the bed. When he woke up, the usual rush returned. Coffee, shower, commute, no learning session. His brain immediately started building excuses. It's fine. You already proved you can do it. Missing 1 day doesn't matter. Technically true, but something inside him felt uneasy. Because he recognized the pattern. One missed day rarely stays alone. Neglect grows quietly. That night he almost skipped the reading too. His thumb hovered over the social media icon. Just a few minutes. That phrase had stolen hundreds of hours before. For a moment the old routine almost won. Then he remembered something uncomfortable. Being stuck never felt like a dramatic collapse. It felt exactly like this. Tiny decisions drifting back toward autopilot. He put the phone down and opened the book. Not because he felt disciplined, but because he understood something most people ignore. The battle is never against difficulty. It is against drift. Days passed. 10 minutes turned into 15 naturally. Not through force, through curiosity. Concepts that looked confusing before began to connect. Charts started making sense. Patterns appeared inside data. For the first time in years, he felt a quiet spark of competence growing. Still small, still fragile, but real. 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened during a meeting. The operations team was struggling to understand shipping delays across several routes. Charts on the screen looked messy and unclear. Managers debated explanations that sounded confident but empty. Arman watched quietly. His brain suddenly recognized the pattern in the data. A bottleneck forming at specific ports during particular hours. The same logic he had been studying every morning. His heart beat faster. Part of him wanted to stay silent. That was the safer move. The invisible move. But another part remembered the 1% shift. Small actions compound. So do small acts of courage. He cleared his throat. The room turned slightly. His explanation wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. The room went quiet for a moment. Then someone asked him to show the pattern again. For the first time in years, Arman felt something unfamiliar. Not pride, evidence. Proof that tiny practice had started bending reality. Yet that night something strange happened. Instead of feeling unstoppable, he felt fear. Because now there was evidence that growth was possible. Which meant the next level required consistency. And consistency demands identity. The question appeared quietly in his mind. Are you someone who occasionally tries? Or someone who keeps shifting the direction? That answer would decide everything next. The strange thing about real progress is that it doesn't feel like progress while it's happening. It feels ordinary. The same mornings, the same desk, the same quiet effort, except something beneath the surface starts rewiring itself. After that meeting, Arman didn't walk out feeling like a new man. There was no cinematic moment, no applause echoing through the hallway. Most people in the room forgot the discussion by the next day, but Arman didn't. Because that moment carried evidence. Not motivation, not hope, evidence. For years his mind had repeated the same quiet accusation. You're stuck because you don't have what it takes. But evidence is dangerous to old beliefs. Evidence interrupts them. A few weeks earlier he couldn't read that data clearly. Now he could. Not perfectly, but better. And the only thing that changed was a handful of 10-minute sessions stacked quietly together. Which meant the story in his head had a crack in it. And once a belief cracks, it never feels as solid again. The following days tested him more than he expected. Because success doesn't only bring confidence, it brings pressure. The next morning when the alarm rang, a new voice appeared. What if yesterday was luck? What if the next time you speak up you're wrong? What if people realize you're pretending? The familiar shape of self-doubt had simply changed costumes. Arman sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folded paper that had started this whole shift. The 3 lines were still there. Wake earlier. Learn the system. Read instead of scrolling. Nothing about those lines guaranteed confidence. They guaranteed something better. Evidence. He opened the laptop again. Not because he felt fearless, but because he understood the real mechanism now. Confidence is not created by believing in yourself. It is created by repeatedly proving to yourself that effort produces movement. Small proof, collected daily. That is how identity changes. Weeks passed. His mornings kept their quiet rhythm. Sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 20, occasionally only 5, when life pushed back. But he never allowed the streak to disappear completely, because he had learned the real rule. Perfection doesn't compound, consistency does. At work, the shift started becoming visible. He began noticing inefficiencies others overlooked. Not because he was suddenly brilliant, because his brain had spent hours studying patterns the rest of the team never examined. One afternoon, his manager asked him to review a shipping report before a quarterly meeting. Arman closed the office door and studied the numbers. 3 months earlier, he would have skimmed them quickly and hoped no one asked questions. Now he saw layers. Delays forming across routes. Inventory spikes before storms. A predictable chain reaction hiding in plain sight. The data told a story, and he understood the language. When the meeting started, he presented the analysis carefully, not aggressively, not trying to impress, just clearly. Silence followed for a moment. Then the director leaned forward. Why haven't we seen this before? The question wasn't really for Arman. It was for the room. But something inside him shifted again. Because the answer was simple. They hadn't seen it before. Because most people wait for big breakthroughs, while direction is quietly decided by tiny investments nobody notices. That evening, Arman walked out of the building into the same parking lot that had once felt like a holding pattern for his life. The lights hummed again. Cars pulled out one by one. Nothing about the world looked different, but he understood something now that his past self had missed. Feeling stuck had never been a life sentence. It had been a direction, and direction can bend. Not through dramatic reinvention, through tiny levers pulled consistently. The 1% shift. Wake slightly earlier. Learn slightly more. Choose curiosity over distraction. Speak up once when silence feels safer. Each action alone looks meaningless, but direction is patient. Tilt the path 1% today, and time magnifies the angle. Months later, the road leads somewhere new. Not because of a single heroic decision, because of hundreds of microscopic ones. Arman reached his car and paused before unlocking it. For years he had been waiting for life to suddenly move forward. Now he understood the truth most people miss. Life doesn't move forward. You move the direction, millimeter by millimeter, choice by choice, identity by identity. And the moment you stop asking, why am I stuck, and start asking, where is the next 1% shift, the entire game changes. Because people who transform their lives are not the ones who make massive moves once. They are the ones who quietly adjust direction every day. So if you feel stuck right now, understand this. You are not trapped. You are simply repeating a direction. Change 1% of that direction today. Wake 10 minutes earlier. Learn one skill longer. Replace one distraction with one deliberate action. It will feel too small to matter. That's exactly why it works. Because the ego ignores small moves. But time never does. And the person you become 5 years from now will not be decided by one giant moment. It will be decided by the tiny shifts you repeat when nobody is watching. So start there. Find the 1% lever in your day and move it.